For most people, a missed phone call is nothing more than an inconvenience. A delayed text message is easy to explain away. Life gets busy, batteries die, plans change. But sometimes a silence appears that feels different. Sometimes the people who know us best can sense when something is wrong, long before any official report is filed. In December of 2024, that instinct would become one of the most important factors in a criminal investigation that captured attention across multiple states. It was a case that raised difficult questions about personal safety, digital evidence, and the assumptions criminals make when they believe their victims will not be missed. What began as concern from family members quickly transformed into a race against time, leading investigators through motel records, surveillance footage, vehicle data, cell phone evidence, and eventually a series of discoveries that would place a young Marine at the center of a murder investigation. The victim was a 26-year-old woman named Sharon Bennett. Friends described her as energetic, ambitious, and deeply devoted to her young son. Like many people trying to build a better future, she balanced multiple responsibilities at once. She worked hard, traveled frequently, and maintained close relationships with the people she loved. Those closest to her remembered her sense of humor, her determination, and her ability to make friends wherever she went. While public attention would later focus on the circumstances surrounding her death, the people who knew her wanted the world to understand something important. Before she became the subject of headlines, she was a daughter, a friend, a mother, and a person with goals for the future. In the days leading up to her disappearance, she was staying in the Pensacola area. Nothing appeared unusual from the outside. She continued communicating with family and friends and followed routines that had become second nature. One of those routines involved regular check-ins with people she trusted. It was a simple habit, but one that would later prove crucial. The people in her life knew where she was supposed to be, and when communication suddenly stopped, they immediately recognized that something was wrong. The concern started small. A message went unanswered, then another. Hours passed without contact. Family members attempted to reach her repeatedly. When those efforts failed, worry began turning into alarm. Unlike many missing person investigations that begin days or even weeks after someone vanishes, this one moved quickly because loved ones refused to dismiss the warning signs. They knew her habits, they understood her routines, and they believed that her sudden silence demanded attention. When authorities began examining the situation, they discovered several details that immediately stood out. Her vehicle remained where it was expected to be. Personal belongings had not been taken. Items that most people would normally carry everywhere, including communication devices, had been left behind. Investigators quickly realized they were not dealing with a simple misunderstanding. Something unusual had happened, and the available evidence suggested that the circumstances surrounding her disappearance deserved urgent attention. As detectives expanded their investigation, they focused on reconstructing her final known movements. Modern investigations often rely heavily on digital footprints, and this case was no exception. Every phone call, text message, location ping, and electronic transaction had the potential to reveal part of the story. Investigators worked methodically, collecting records and identifying people who may have interacted with her during her final hours. The process required patience, but piece by piece, a timeline began to emerge. One of the most significant developments involved identifying an individual who had reportedly arranged to meet her shortly before she disappeared. The person was a 20-year-old active-duty Marine named Willie Ellington. At first glance, he did not fit the stereotype many people imagine when they think of a murder suspect. He was young. He had no widely known history of violent crime. He was serving in the military and appeared to be building a future for himself. Yet investigators soon discovered evidence that placed him at the center of their inquiry. The investigation accelerated as detectives examined surveillance footage from locations connected to the case. Cameras captured movements that helped establish a timeline. Vehicle records provided additional clues. Rental information became particularly important because it allowed investigators to track travel patterns and compare them against known events. What emerged was a sequence of activity that demanded further scrutiny. As detectives gathered evidence, they noticed travel that appeared inconsistent with ordinary daily routines. The movements stretched beyond local areas and crossed state lines. Such activity does not automatically indicate criminal behavior, but when combined with other evidence, it became increasingly relevant. Investigators followed the trail carefully, comparing digital records against physical locations and witness statements. Every step brought them closer to understanding what had happened. Meanwhile, the search for Sharon Bennett continued. Family members waited for updates while investigators pursued leads across multiple jurisdictions. Cases involving missing adults can be complex because there are often numerous possible explanations for an absence. However, experienced detectives understand that certain indicators demand immediate attention. The growing collection of evidence suggested that this investigation required exactly that level of urgency. Eventually, investigators made a discovery that transformed the case. What had initially been treated as a missing person investigation became a homicide investigation. The news devastated those who had hoped for a different outcome. For family and friends, the confirmation represented the end of uncertainty, but also the beginning of a painful new reality. The focus shifted from finding her alive to determining exactly what happened and who was responsible. Once the investigation entered this new phase, forensic analysis became even more important. Crime scene specialists reviewed evidence, reconstructed timelines, and examined physical clues. Modern forensic science often provides insights that were impossible just a generation ago. DNA analysis, digital records, location tracking, and electronic communications can collectively reveal patterns that suspects may believe are hidden. In this case, investigators reportedly relied on a combination of traditional detective work and modern technology to strengthen their understanding of the events. Digital evidence became a particularly significant aspect of the investigation. Phones, computers, applications, and online activity can preserve information long after users believe it has disappeared. Search histories, account records, and location data often create detailed timelines that help investigators verify or challenge statements made during interviews. Experts frequently describe digital devices as silent witnesses because they record activity without emotion, bias, or memory loss. As authorities continued building their case, public interest grew rapidly. News organizations reported new developments. Social media discussions expanded. Community members sought answers about how such a tragedy could occur. Many observers were struck by the speed with which investigators appeared to identify a suspect. Others focused on the role technology played in modern criminal investigations. Together, these factors turned the case into a subject of widespread attention. One of the most discussed aspects involved assumptions. Criminal investigations repeatedly demonstrate that offenders often make decisions based on what they think will happen rather than what actually happens. They may underestimate victims, families, witnesses, or investigators. They may believe certain evidence cannot be recovered or that certain actions cannot be traced. History shows that such assumptions are frequently wrong. In this case, investigators appeared determined to challenge every assumption through evidence, analysis, and persistence. The emotional impact of the case extended far beyond official proceedings. Friends remembered conversations, shared experiences, and future plans that would never happen. Family members faced unimaginable grief while simultaneously navigating public attention. Communities often struggle to process cases involving young victims because they force people to confront difficult realities about vulnerability, trust, and violence. At the same time, the investigation highlighted practical lessons about personal safety. Many experts emphasize the importance of communication plans, trusted contacts, location sharing, and routine check-ins. No safety strategy can eliminate risk entirely, but preparation can dramatically improve the speed at which concerns are recognized and responses begin. In this case, family awareness appears to have accelerated the reporting process and contributed to the rapid launch of investigative efforts. As legal proceedings moved forward, authorities emphasized an important principle of the justice system. Criminal charges are allegations, not convictions. Determining guilt or innocence ultimately remains the responsibility of the courts. Investigators collect evidence. Prosecutors present arguments. Defense attorneys challenge those arguments. Judges oversee proceedings. Juries evaluate facts. Each stage exists to ensure fairness and due process. While those legal questions continue through the judicial system, the broader significance of the case remains clear. It serves as a reminder of how quickly ordinary days can become extraordinary. It demonstrates the value of strong family connections and communication habits. It illustrates the growing role of digital evidence in modern investigations. Most importantly, it reminds us that every headline represents real people whose lives have been permanently changed. For many observers, the most memorable aspect of the story is not technology, forensic science, or courtroom procedure. It is the determination shown by those who refuse to stop looking, the family members who recognized that something was wrong, the investigators who followed evidence across multiple locations, the community members who shared information and maintained awareness. Together, their actions helped ensure that the disappearance received immediate attention rather than fading into uncertainty. Cases like this often prompt broader discussions about responsibility, accountability, and prevention. Communities ask what warning signs were missed. Families discuss safety plans. Law enforcement agencies evaluate investigative methods. These conversations cannot undo what happened, but they can help reduce future risks and strengthen awareness. Sometimes the most meaningful lessons emerge from the most painful circumstances. As the case continues through the legal process, one fact remains beyond dispute. A young mother lost her life, and a family lost someone they loved. Behind every document, every piece of evidence, and every courtroom proceeding lies that human reality. It is easy to become focused on investigative details and legal developments, but the true center of the story is the person whose future was taken away. The investigation stands as a powerful example of how modern policing combines traditional detective work with advanced technology. Surveillance footage, digital records, forensic analysis, witness interviews, and interagency cooperation all played roles in developing the case. None of these elements operated independently. Instead, they worked together to create a clearer picture of events and guide investigators toward answers. Ultimately, this story is about more than crime. It is about human connection. It is about the people who notice when something is wrong. It is about the determination to seek truth even during moments of overwhelming grief. And it is about the reality that in an age of smartphones, digital records, and interconnected systems, actions often leave traces that remain long after someone believes they have disappeared. As investigators continued reviewing evidence, they found themselves confronting a reality that has become increasingly common in modern criminal cases. The digital age has changed the way crimes are investigated. Every movement, every transaction, every online interaction has the potential to leave behind a trail. People often think of technology as something that protects privacy through passwords and encryption, but in many investigations it serves the opposite purpose. Phones, vehicles, apps, location services, surveillance cameras, and online accounts collectively create a timeline that can become difficult to dispute. Detectives knew that understanding those timelines would be critical. Rather than relying on assumptions, They focused on building a factual sequence of events. They wanted to know where people were, when they were there, and what evidence could independently verify those movements. Cases that attract national attention often appear dramatic from the outside, but behind the scenes, they are usually built through thousands of small details. One receipt, one camera angle, one timestamp, one witness statement. Individually, these details may seem insignificant. Together, they can tell an entire story. Investigators compared information from multiple sources, looking for consistencies and contradictions. Every discovery either strengthened or weakened a theory. That process is rarely fast, but it remains one of the most effective ways to uncover the truth. While the investigation progressed, conversations began taking place across social media. Many people focused on the victim's profession, while others argued that no occupation should affect the urgency of a missing person investigation. Law enforcement officials have repeatedly emphasized that every victim deserves the same commitment to justice. The circumstances surrounding a person's life should never determine the value placed on their safety. In many ways, public reaction to the case reflected broader discussions taking place throughout society about vulnerability, victimization, and public perception. Friends and supporters shared photographs, memories, and personal stories. They wanted the public to see the person behind the headlines. They described someone who loved her family, enjoyed making people laugh, and worked hard to create opportunities for herself and her child. Those personal details mattered because they restored humanity to a story that risked becoming defined solely by tragedy. Investigators understood that public attention could be both helpful and challenging. Increased awareness often generates tips, witnesses, and information that might otherwise remain hidden. At the same time, speculation can spread quickly, creating confusion and misinformation. Detectives therefore focused on evidence rather than rumors. They knew that court proceedings would ultimately depend on facts that could be verified. As the case continued, experts pointed to the importance of behavioral patterns. People tend to establish routines, whether they realize it or not. We visit familiar places, communicate with certain individuals, and follow predictable schedules. When those patterns suddenly change, investigators take notice. In missing person investigations, abrupt deviations from normal behavior can provide valuable clues. In this case, loved ones recognize those changes almost immediately. Their awareness helped transform concern into action before critical time was lost. Time remains one of the most important factors in any investigation. The first hours after a disappearance can determine whether evidence is preserved, witnesses are located, and leads remain fresh. Every passing day introduces new challenges. Memories fade, physical evidence deteriorates, opportunities disappear. That reality explains why investigators often move quickly, even when they do not yet understand exactly what happened. Acting early increases the chances of finding answers later. The broader significance of this case extends beyond the individuals directly involved. It highlights the role communities play in protecting one another. Many tragedies are first recognized not by police officers or investigators, but by friends, relatives, co-workers, and neighbors who notice something unusual. Human awareness remains one of the most powerful safety tools available. Technology may assist investigations, but concern from loved ones often starts them. As legal proceedings move forward, the story continues evolving. Evidence will be examined, arguments will be presented, and decisions will eventually be made within the justice system. Those outcomes belong to the courts. What remains certain, however, is that this case serves as a reminder of how interconnected modern life has become. Actions leave traces, decisions create consequences, and even when someone believes they have acted without witnesses, the reality may be very different. Cameras record, devices store information, records persist. The modern world remembers more than many people realize. Perhaps the most enduring lesson comes from the relationships at the center of the story. Family members who refused to ignore warning signs demonstrated the value of communication and trust. Their actions reflected something simple but powerful. When people care about one another, they notice absence. They notice silence. They notice when something feels wrong. That awareness cannot prevent every tragedy, but it can make a crucial difference. In a world where millions of interactions occur every day, genuine human connection remains one of the strongest protections we have. The story of this investigation is ultimately a story about that connection, about persistence in the face of uncertainty, and about the determination to seek answers when questions refuse to disappear. Cases like this often force investigators to confront a difficult reality about modern crime. The public usually sees only the final result: an arrest, a press conference, or a courtroom appearance. What remains hidden are the countless hours spent reviewing records, verifying information, and eliminating possibilities that ultimately lead nowhere. Experienced detectives understand that successful investigations are rarely built around a single dramatic discovery. More often, they are built through persistence. A witness remembers a small detail. A timestamp confirms a location. A surveillance camera captures a vehicle passing through an intersection. A digital record places a device somewhere at a specific moment in time. One fact supports another until a clearer picture begins to emerge. That process can be frustratingly slow, but it is also what separates evidence from speculation. In a world increasingly shaped by social media, public opinion often forms long before all the facts are known. People naturally search for explanations when confronted with a tragedy. They want to understand motives, decisions, and missed warning signs. Yet investigators are trained to approach those questions differently. Rather than beginning with conclusions, they begin with evidence. Every theory must be tested. Every assumption must be challenged. Every claim must be verified. The goal is not to tell the most compelling story. The goal is to determine what actually happened. That distinction becomes especially important in high-profile cases where public attention can generate both useful information and significant misinformation. Technology has transformed that process in remarkable ways. 20 years ago, investigators relied heavily on eyewitness testimony and physical evidence. Today, digital records often provide an entirely new layer of information. Phones communicate with cell towers. Vehicles generate location data. Applications record activity. Security cameras operate around the clock. These systems were not designed specifically for criminal investigations, yet they frequently become critical sources of evidence. The result is a world where actions leave traces that can persist long after memories fade. This shift has changed not only how crimes are investigated, but also how prosecutors present cases in court. Jurors increasingly expect timelines supported by objective records. They want to see how evidence connects. They want to understand how investigators reach their conclusions. Modern criminal cases often involve translating complex digital information into narratives that ordinary people can evaluate and understand. Beyond the investigative process, cases like this raise broader questions about safety and awareness. Many experts encourage individuals to establish communication routines with trusted friends or family members. These routines do not need to be complicated. A simple check-in message, a shared location, or a predetermined contact schedule can make a significant difference when something goes wrong. Such measures are not guarantees of safety, but they can shorten response times and help loved ones recognize problems earlier. In many situations, awareness becomes the first step toward intervention. The story also highlights the importance of community. People sometimes underestimate how much protection comes from simply being connected to others. Isolation creates vulnerability. Connection creates accountability. When someone has friends, relatives, co-workers, and neighbors who pay attention, unusual behavior is more likely to be noticed. Missed appointments, unanswered messages, and unexpected absences stand out. Human relationships create networks of observation that technology alone cannot replace. That reality remains true, regardless of how advanced investigative tools become. At its core, every criminal investigation involves people: victims, families, witnesses, detectives, prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, and jurors all play roles within the justice system. The evidence matters because people matter. Behind every report, every document, and every courtroom proceeding lies a human story. The legal process exists not merely to determine facts, but to provide accountability and fairness. While public attention often focuses on dramatic developments, the ultimate purpose remains the pursuit of truth through lawful and transparent procedures. As society continues adapting to new technologies, cases like this will likely become more common. Digital evidence will grow more sophisticated. Investigative techniques will continue evolving. Yet some aspects of human behavior remain unchanged. People still rely on trust. Families still worry when loved ones disappear. Communities still seek answers when tragedy strikes. And investigators still depend on patience, discipline, and evidence to uncover the truth. Those enduring realities explain why stories like this continue to resonate. They remind us that behind every investigation is a search not only for accountability, but also for understanding. The desire to know what happened, why it happened, and how it might be prevented in the future remains one of the most powerful forces driving both criminal investigations and public interest.